And welcome to Let's Get To. I'm your host, James Christopher, and today we're going to do things just a little bit different. So during my Wild West tour of South Dakota and Wyoming and Montana and Colorado, I was doing regular updates and for the most part, getting a really positive reaction to them, especially the one where I talked about how I manage data after a shoot. And, people were interested in how that all works. Some people were like, why can't this be faster? Because you're just shooting on your phone. And so I thought this was a good opportunity to essentially give you a behind the scenes look as we make Let's Get To Baseball from Sea to Shining Sea happen. Now, the first step is the most obvious step. We need to pick the teams that we're going to cover. And we start doing this about 9 months before a season starts or while the current season is still going. For example, we've actually narrowed down our trip next year to 25 teams so far. There's a lot of different criteria that we look for: branding, location. For example, we know we're going to go see the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. Now, knowing that we're going to go see the Blue Wahoos, we then went to our friends, baseballmapper.com, and then drew about a 6-hour circle and said, who else can we see that will fit into our show? And so we're going to try to pick between Birmingham and Montgomery and Rocket City. And that's when we start deciding exactly when and where we're going to go someplace. And then that schedule can change. The schedule will begin to get finalized and formalized in September when the minor league baseball schedule comes out. But we really start working on who to cover about 9 months in advance. One of the things that we do whenever the season's getting ready to start, we try to hit this a little early so that way we're not bugging people in the middle of the craziness that comes with putting on a minor league baseball season, is we reach out to the teams. We will reach out to them and let them know what our show is, let them know what our show's about, let them know what we'll need from them to cover them, and gauge their interest. Generally speaking, teams are excited to be covered by us. They're excited to come on the show. There's a few times where people say no, and there's even more times when people ignore us. But for the most part, we've definitely getting a good response, especially as the show has progressed. Now, before we head out, I usually write the cold open. We didn't always do cold opens on the show, and it was pointed out to me that that's the way broadcast TV works for shows like this, and we're really trying to get our show to evolve to the point where it could be broadcast ready. And so, yeah, we do a cold open just like a Bond film, but not as, expensive as a Bond film. But we usually want it to be something kind of goofy, kind of funny. And so we start coming up with ideas usually well in advance. And for example, for the episode you're watching now, I sort of had this idea to do Take Me Home Country Roads as if it were William Shatner doing Rocket Man. And I know that's not the most creative idea, but that just gives you the example that I knew that going in, that's what we were going to do. And sometimes, we'll audible when we get there. Having Thor on the episode a while back was not expected, and then we just ditched the original plan. So it is fluid, but generally speaking, the cold open is written before we even get on a plane. Now, we get to the ballpark usually about an hour before gates open, and there's a couple reasons for this. One, you've got to get all your gear together. This stuff takes a minute to put together. It's about 40 pounds total of film gear. There's a monitor if we're shooting during the day, a light if we're shooting at night. So it's complicated. The other thing, too, is I actually think it's funny when people make goofy faces in the camera, but it's not appropriate for all segments, and it's not appropriate. It's fine for the holler and a swaller segment, but not necessarily from the bleachers when we're trying to break down the game experience. The other part is that we can't visit every team on a Friday or a Thursday or a Saturday. Thirsty Thursdays, Friday Night Fireworks, and usually there's a giveaway on a Saturday or a theme night. Those are the big selling nights in minor league baseball. We cannot be at a team every Friday. Sometimes we might have to visit your club on a Tuesday. So we feel like if we shoot the park before anybody gets there, we're shooting it empty. That way it plays like we got there early and shot the park and not like no one attended the game. Because I don't want people to get the wrong impression based on one example that we have, which is a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, which are usually slower. Now, while at the ballpark, we shoot the concourse, we shoot the merch, we shoot where you can get food, where you can get drinks. We shoot every single angle of the ballpark, focusing, if there's unique dimensions or something like that. We shoot everything that you can possibly imagine, from the field level all the way up to the press box. One of the other things that we'll do is we'll shoot a lot of our drops and some of our complete segments there. So we'll shoot the opening to From the Bleachers. We'll shoot the opening and closing of Show Me the Merch. We'll shoot usually all of Holler and a Swaller. And the only time we wouldn't do that segment is if all you have is sort of generic nationwide beer. We're not interested in talking about your Holler and a Swaller, and if all you've got to Holler and Swaller is Coors or Bud Light. It's kind of an extension of our sort of unwritten rule that we don't really cover teams that have the same name as the parent club. So it means some teams in Iowa and Mississippi probably just aren't going to get covered by us unless we run out of teams. And I mean, let's be honest, with the way relocation and rebranding works, will we? Will we? So after the shoot, we get back to the hotel room, we dump the footage, we charge in batteries. This happens before anything else, before I take a shower, before I settle in to watch Shark Week, because I tend to watch a lot of Shark Week when I'm in hotels. I have them, I can stream it from a million different places. So I'm always watching Shark Week when I'm in a hotel. But we get all that stuff done before anything. And sometimes what I'll even do once we get everything dumped to the computer is I'll go ahead and edit some of the simpler segments, like Holler and a Swaller, which really doesn't take a lot of editing unless I'm just mixing the sound. I do that one. That way I can get it to the point where I feel like I'm accomplishing something. And that's my own neurosis, because I will have shot a ballpark. I would have been in a ballpark for 5 hours working on this stuff, and I still would have felt like I accomplished nothing. So I try to knock out a couple of the easy segments. And one of the things that we do with every segment we make is we export it as a 4K MP4. And then we put it in a special folder called Final Segments or Exported Segments. And we'll use those individual segments, of which there will be 5 to 7, to put the whole episode together. I just think it's easier to work with them that way than trying to edit an entire movie or entire show with all the elements that go into that in one timeline. So we definitely will start smaller, work bigger, and then we will use those standalone segments once they're exported. The next step that I'll do is I'll create graphics for the interviews. So for example, Who's On First, which is how we represent the team we're covering, I tend to change the graphics of the frame around the video to match the team, to match the logo, just to make it feel a little bit more organic to the team. And so once I get those done and exported, I just drop the interviews in, fit them into the windows, and boom, those are also complete. And now the hard part. So we'll do a rough cut of the Show Me the Merch and the From the Bleachers segments. And I'm always reminded of the film days, where one of the things you would talk about was shooting ratio. How many minutes of finished film equates to how many minutes or hours of footage. And so, for example, we want the From the Bleachers segment to be about 5 minutes, easily consumable. So that way we can put it online as a standalone thing as well. So we want that to be about 5 minutes. Well, by the time I get everything that I just like a little bit onto the timeline, we're looking at sometimes anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes. That 25 to 35 minutes has to become 5. For Show Me the Merch, it's about 10 to 12, and that has to become 3. So there's a lot of editing to do to get it to where we need it. So the next thing that I'll do with that is I will then write the script. And I'll write the script a few times. I'll go over it and go over it. I want it to feel off the cuff, but I also want it to feel like an emotional reflection of the ballpark and not just that the seats were close. All that's important, but it has to be in a bigger storytelling context for it to be worth watching. So once we've gotten that written, I'll be at home and I'll record it right here. And then I'll take the WAV file that we've recorded and I'll put it into Adobe Audition. That's their sound editing software, where I will EQ it. I'll remove any noise that needs to come out, and I'll make sure that it's leveled. Then I export that wave to another wave, take the new wave, I know it's confusing, and drop it into Adobe Premiere into the individual segment. And then I will finish the cut by cutting it to the voiceover, adding music. We'll add some animation to some of the still photos. That way it feels like it's alive and not like you're in Cheers watching Frasier and Diane's trip to Paris. If you know, you know. Upon completing that segment, then I'll work on Raiders of the Lost Diamond. By then, Andrew Nelson would have sent me a script, and I'll look over it. Usually I don't have to make any changes, and I'll record it right from there. And then I will go and find supplemental materials, visual aids to kind of back up the Raiders segment for those that are watching the show and not just listening to it. And sometimes that can be hard. I mean, it's hard to find a 1910 team from Jacksonville's images. It just is. But we do our best to make it as visually interesting as possible. It's one of my favorite segments to do, and that usually ends up being about a 3 to 5 minute segment. Finally, I will write and record the first pitch. And I do tend to do this as close as possible to the release of the episode. That way, if there's something timely I need to talk about or something on my mind, it feels fresher. So I'll record it here where I'm at now. It's the only segment that doesn't really tie directly into either the community or the team that we're covering. But yeah, it's one of my favorite segments to do because it's me getting to talk to myself. So once each segment has been edited, exported, and put in that special folder, I will then go to the sequence in Adobe Premiere that is for the master of the episode. And then I'll simply drag the 5 to 7 files in place. I'll do one quick mastering of the audio, and then I'll export the audio just to a wave. And then that wave will go into Audition again. And I've been tinkering with it, so I've created some presets that basically will master the episode for me. It will fine-tune levels. It'll make sure that we don't go over a certain dB and we're not lower than a certain dB. And it'll mix all that. And it's kind of neat because when you look at the file when you first export it, it's like this. And then when you look at it after you've exported, it's almost straight. And so you get a really even sound throughout the episode, because one of the things I hate the most, be it podcast, be it movie, is having to do the volume up and down. Like why we can't mix gunshots to still be louder than dialogue, but close, I don't understand. Once completed and we've exported the new master audio, that actually becomes the podcast. So that goes to Buzzsprout, where it'll be populated in iTunes. It'll be populated in Spotify, Google Play, anywhere you get a podcast. I think we're on iHeart now. So all those places. Then we take the same file we just uploaded, put it back in Premiere, and we basically use it to delete all the old audio and have the new cleaned up audio in its place. Then we will export the entire show in a 4K H.264 MP4 format that'll come out to about 30 gigabytes per episode. So all of that is about 20 to 25 hours of work. And if you think about the schedule when we're shooting, it doesn't really stop during the season. You know, the episodes beforehand and after, and we do a special episode with like Eric Mertens and Paul Caputo. Those are easier because it's really just the Zoom situation. So it's really about the graphics that are already pre-made. But for the in-season covering a team episode, it's about 20 to 25 hours. And I don't say that I don't want to be a martyr about it, because I love every second. It's creative. It gives me a chance to basically cover baseball for a living, or part of my living, some of my living. But it really is just a blast. And one of the things I'll do is I'll actually drop the episode about 8 o'clock the night before. So that way my Patreon people can see it, and people that are really hardcore followers will get a chance to listen to it early. So anyway, thanks for listening or watching. I just thought some of you guys might like to see how the sausage is made.
I just wanted you to know how hard it was.